All right, so today we're diving into something a little different,
Yeah.
We always see those images of forests burning,
Yeah.
right? Like the California wildfires. It's
Right.
always sort of out there somewhere else. But we're talking about how those wildfires are actually impacting cities in ways we
Yeah.
might not think about.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're looking at this document. I don't know, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
It talks about the ripple effects, like all these things that happen
hmm
because of the fires, but not the flames themselves, right?
Beyond the immediate.
Yeah, yeah. And it's actually, I mean, this is kind of kind of unsettling,
Right.
but it shows how these fires can actually make the housing crisis in California even worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really key point. And it's something that a lot of folks don't think about, right?
Well, no.
We tend to think about the immediate impact of the fires, but it's these ripple effects are so significant.
Yeah. So let's just start, I guess, with the most obvious thing.
Yeah.
Just the destruction.
Right.
Like we see these images, but we're talking about entire neighborhoods, businesses,
Mm-hmm.
just landmarks, like places that people live their lives.
Yeah.
They go to work,
Mhm.
they go to the store, like these places just gone, reduced to ash.
Yeah.
So what's the scale of this? And what does that, I mean, really, what does that mean for the people who live there?
Yeah. I mean, the scale is pretty staggering. We're talking about thousands of homes, thousands of businesses
Yeah.
lost in a single fire, right? So you think about the people who live there, they've built their lives there.
Mm.
Their memories are there, and then suddenly, it's just gone.
It's just, yeah.
And so the emotional toll of that is immeasurable, right?
Right.
And then there's the rebuilding process, which can take years, decades even. And some communities, frankly, they may never fully recover.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to even wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned, just thousands of homes gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately think, okay, housing crisis.
Right.
So if there are fewer homes, that means there's more demand, which means the prices go up.
Exactly. Supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
And California's housing market is already so expensive.
I mean, it's
It just exacerbates it.
astronomical. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then there's the thing that always comes up with any kind of natural disaster,
Mm-hmm.
insurance.
Insurance.
So what happens with insurance in these situations?
So insurance companies, they get really hesitant to insure homes in these areas
Right.
that are prone to wildfires,
Makes sense.
right? Or what they'll do is they'll jack up the premiums
Oh, wow.
to exorbitant levels.
So it's like you can't afford to live there.
Exactly. Yeah. It becomes unaffordable to
Yeah.
stay there, to rebuild.
So people are kind of stuck. It's like they're pushed out.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a really, really tough situation for a lot of folks.
Yeah. And I mean, this all feeds into the economic,
Well,
consequences.
absolutely. Fallout, right. Huge impact there.
Yeah.
Businesses, especially small businesses, they're incredibly vulnerable after a wildfire.
I mean, I would imagine so.
Yeah. In fact, studies have shown that, after a major wildfire, nearly 40% of small businesses, they never reopen.
Wow, that's a huge number.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. That's lost jobs.
Right.
That's reduced tax revenue for the city. And then it just has this ripple effect throughout the entire local economy.
Yeah, and I'm curious. Yeah, you said small businesses are particularly vulnerable.
Yeah.
What are some of the specific challenges that they face in these situations?
Yeah. So, a lot of small businesses, they may not have insurance.
Oh,
Or if they do, they might be underinsured for an event like this.
right.
And a lot of them, they just don't have the financial reserves to weather these prolonged closures and the costs of rebuilding.
Right.
And then there's also the challenge of, even if they can rebuild, of attracting customers back to an area
Yeah.
that's been devastated by fire.
That makes sense. It's like this whole, interconnected.
The domino effect.
Yeah, domino effect, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the economy, right?
Right.
The document also talks about how wildfires disrupt like daily life for people.
Absolutely.
I mean, and it's more than just, an inconvenience.
It is.
Right? Like what are some of the ways that happens?
Well, think about essential services. Schools might be damaged or they might be closed.
Oh, right.
Because of the poor air quality. Hospitals could be overwhelmed with people coming in with smoke inhalation.
No.
Basic utilities like electricity and water could be disrupted.
Yeah.
So it really just throws everything into chaos.
Right.
People's routines are disrupted.
Yeah.
They don't know when their kids can go back to school.
Right.
They don't know if they'll have access to health care.
Yeah.
It's a really, really uncertain time.
Yeah. Just, overwhelming, I imagine, just anxiety.
Absolutely. And the psychological impact is significant.
Yeah.
People are dealing with the trauma of losing their homes, their businesses, the stress of being displaced.
Right.
And then the constant fear of future fires.
Yeah.
So it can have really long-lasting effects on mental health and well-being.
Yeah. And then there are the health hazards. That's sort of the thing you always hear about with wildfire.
Yeah, the smoke.
Yeah. But this document actually, it goes beyond just, breathing in the smoke.
Right.
Right.
It does.
What are some of the other concerns?
Yeah, so while that immediate threat of smoke is very serious,
Yeah.
the long-term health implications are also concerning.
Yep.
Prolonged exposure to that wildfire smoke can make existing respiratory conditions worse.
Oh, okay.
Like asthma.
Right.
And it can even lead to chronic lung diseases, cardiovascular problems.
Wow.
So it's not just something that, you cough for a couple days and then you're fine.
Right.
It can have really long-term consequences.
So are there specific, respiratory illnesses that are more common after these big fires?
Yeah, you see a noticeable increase in cases of bronchitis, pneumonia, even chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, in the months and years following these major wildfires.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is the fine particles in the smoke. They can actually penetrate deep into the lungs, and they cause inflammation and long-term damage.
Wow. It's kind of scary to think about that lasting impact.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, the smoke travels.
Yeah.
It can go hundreds of miles.
Absolutely. Yeah, it impacts air quality far beyond where the fire's actually burning.
Okay, so that must have huge implications for, cities that rely on tourism.
Absolutely, yeah. California's tourism industry, it takes a major hit when these wildfires are raging.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And even if the attractions themselves aren't damaged, people are worried about the smoke, the potential hazards.
Right. Yeah.
So they stay away.
It's not worth the risk.
Exactly. And so that loss of tourism revenue, it has this ripple effect. It impacts businesses, jobs, funding for local services.
Right. So, we've talked about a lot of, the consequences, the impacts. What are some of the long-term challenges that come out of all of this?
Yeah, I think one of the most significant challenges is community displacement.
Okay.
When people are faced with this daunting task of rebuilding and the fear of future fires, a lot of families, a lot of businesses, they just choose to relocate permanently.
Right.
And that can lead to, population decline, and it can really change the character of a community.
Right.
And so it becomes this question of resilience,
Yeah.
How can cities adapt to these challenges and build a more sustainable future?
I'm glad you brought up, the idea of cities adapting, because one of the things that really struck me about this document is that it seems to highlight this connection, this really deep connection between, the urban environment and the natural world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not just like they're separate.
Yeah.
They're totally intertwined.
Yeah.
Is that something that the research really digs into?
Absolutely. Yeah. The document emphasizes that wildfires, they're not just a rural problem.
Right.
They're a consequence of all these complex interactions between climate change, land management practices, urban development patterns. So it really forces us to rethink how we build and manage our cities in a way that recognizes this interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been really insightful.
Yeah.
It's a little
sobering.
Yeah, sobering for sure.
A little bit heavy.
Yeah, it's heavy, but it's it's necessary.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important to understand these issues.
Yeah.
Because they're only going to become more pressing in the future as climate change continues to impact our world.
Yeah. And it's clear that the impacts of these fires are huge.
Yeah.
And they're complicated.
Complex. Yeah.
And it's going to, we're going to need like a big response to this.
Yeah, a multifaceted approach for sure. You can't just address one aspect of it. You have to think about all these different factors.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, the question for all of us, listening to this is, what can we do?
Right.
Like, what steps can we take, individually?
Yeah.
But also, as communities,
collectively,
to deal with this, to mitigate these risks, and to build
more resilient communities. Yeah.
Yeah, in the face of a changing climate.
Absolutely, and it's a question that requires ongoing dialogue and action.
Yeah, it's not going to be solved overnight.
No.
This is something that we need to be thinking about
for the long haul.
Yeah, for the long haul. Well, this has been a great conversation. It's given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, me too.
And I hope it's done the same for our listeners.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Bye.